And to our audience, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone joining this keynote session. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jaleh Daie. Jaleh is the chairperson and founder of AgFood Tech and Band of Angels, partner of Aurora Equity, and board director of Asia Society of Northern California. Jaleh has exceptional depth and breadth of experience in private and public sectors in ag tech and food tech, which she leverages in her role as an investor, strategic advisor, and board director. In fact, one of her investments is an Indian company called Dehat. She has served administrations of 3 presidents, worked in 8 countries, and received numerous awards. She was also a fully tenured professor in Agri for about 20 years. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Jaleh. Jaleh, the floor is all yours.
Good evening, Hyderabad, and thank you so much for the kind introduction, Prashant. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of my friends and colleagues who are all around the world. And especially, I want to thank the organizers, my good friend Vish Mishra, Manohar Reddy, Mahavir Sharma, and the excellent technical team who are transforming me seamlessly from America to Hyderabad. So with that, let me connect my slides here for a second. What I'd like to do today is talk to you about AgFood Tech and how it provides a pathway to sustainability. Sustainability is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. And I want to emphasize the fact that ag-food systems have extraordinary impact on many aspects of our lives. It is estimated to be a $15 trillion industry, arguably one of the largest industry. And no matter what we do with food and agriculture, it's going to have an impact on our health, and the health of the environment, which is translated in climate change. It is a matter of national security because without adequate food supplies, we are not going to be a strong nation, regardless of where in the world you are. And it's the base of jobs and prosperity. Many countries realize that unless they have a strong base of agriculture, they cannot continue to develop economically. Okay, so let me start by mentioning a few global megatrends. Obviously, we are continuing to be in the middle of a pandemic. Thankfully, it's now being managed with vaccines and soon therapeutics, hopefully. And I think that it's going to be turning into an endemic, one that we would have to deal with for a number of years, just like the way we manage flu, the common flu. Another mega trend is climate change. I don't have to say much about that. The audience knows about this. Soil degradation is a big issue as part of it. We are concerned all over the world with social gaps and the plight of the small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses that seems to have been left behind. And covering all of this, across all of this, is the increase in world population. And one big factor as part of this that impacts how food systems are going to be impacted is the rise of the middle class in Asia, which is demanding more proteins. And also, I want to put the whole subject in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals that have been established by the United Nations. And obviously, as I would talk through my slides, you would see that many of the subjects and topics that I bring up are related to one of the 17 goals of the UN SDGs. Okay, here's what I want to start with, the core of the talk and where I want to go. I want to talk about the dichotomy of hungry versus overfed. There are some, by the UN World Food Program statistics show that there are 800 million people who are hungry. 265 of those are on the verge of starvation. And then on the other end, there are over 2 billion people to consider to be overfed and obese, but they're malnourished because they are facing all kinds of metabolic conditions like diabetes, chronic diseases like heart conditions. You know all about it. I don't need to say anything more. But I just want you to remember this dichotomy and how we need to think about our food system in a different way so that we can feed the hungry, but also address this malnutrition and obesity. So to wrap it up in one word or two words, it is not just food security that I'm concerned about and I continue to be interested in, but it's food and nutrition security. We cannot just be satisfied by feeding people. We need to nourish people as well. And okay, so what is one of the biggest tasks we are facing? Is because, as I said, because of the rise in middle class in Asia, there's huge demand for protein. And in fact, by having the world population growth by 2050, we need to produce 70% more food for roughly about 10 billion people. And by 2030, that's only 8-9 years from now, we need to produce 50% more protein. Because if you just look at the size of the middle class in Asia Pacific alone, that is going to be 5 times that of Europe's and 10 times that of North America. And if you stop and think for a second, these are huge challenges that we need to address and address quickly. All right, so the overall messages, key points, takeaways that I want to deliver at this talk are listed here. First, it's not just food security, it's nutrition security. And we need to feed and nourish people. It's not about just sustainability. I don't have time to go into regenerative agriculture, but we need to attain sustainability and go beyond that into regenerative agriculture. And as we do these things, we need to reimagine and transfer systems, and the only way we can do it is through innovation. And innovation can come in many ways and shapes and forms. We need to minimize inputs in agriculture. It is one of the biggest costs and damage to the environment as well. And we need to help small and medium-sized businesses. It's not enough to do things to support big corporations. Big corporations can take care of themselves. We need to also worry about those people who are on the lower rung of the income and revenue. We need to think about alternatives, alternative nutrition, all kinds of different foods and source of nutrition that we can provide. You all know, you all read and experience it day to day. We have logistics problems, supply chains problems. So we need to think about distributed systems that would give some degree of resiliency to the centralized, globalized systems that we have right now. And of course, we need to think about farm revenue before the gate and after the gate. So margins are thin in farming and agriculture. So we need to create new business models to help farmers with improved revenue and margins. Okay, so back to sustainability, concerns of sustainability. This This was just published pre-summit for UN food system and sustainability. Just a few statistics. 80% of the deforestation is caused by agricultural land use. 29% of all the greenhouse gases are emitted from agricultural food systems. 70% of the fresh water use is for agricultural purposes, food and agriculture purposes. 70% of reduction in biodiversity, 52% of the soil degradation, and 50% of the reduction in biodiversity of freshwater fish is attributed to agriculture and food system. So these are huge numbers that are impacting global sustainability. So let's zero in on the global greenhouse gas emissions. It's estimated that 28% of the total is coming from agriculture use and production. 25% of this is basically farm crops and plantation plants, and about 15% is coming from animal husbandry. Okay, so as I mentioned, agriculture and food system are huge, $15 trillion industry. But what is interesting, if this $15 trillion that is contributing to the global GDP and prosperity, there are so many hidden costs that when you look at the balance sheet is basically a negative balance sheet, because the cost of health and environment and all the things that I mentioned. I'm not going to go into the details, but I just want to mention that the Thomas Sack and the World Economic Forum came out with a report a couple days ago, which showed only just South Asia. If you look at Southeast Asia alone, they can save $1.7 trillion per year if they do sustainable practices, sustainable agriculture and food system practices. So it just gives you a sense of it's not just the cost, the obvious cost we see, but the hidden costs that exist within the system. Okay, I want to say something about the consumer demand and the trends that we see in the developing country, and we are beginning to also see in developing economies. Consumers want fresh, nutrient-dense products. They want less sugar, salt, and additives in their food. They are becoming very sustainable and socially responsible. Consciousness is on the rise. And they want to see fair trade, which means the smaller and medium-sized businesses would be treated fairly. And in addition to local and fresh food, consumers want to have definite safety plans put in place and traceability, so that if there is an outbreak of some disease, it's traced back and halted at the source. And of course, we all love convenience, don't we? We want on demand, we want our food anywhere, anytime, where I want it. We are going online more and more to shop groceries and order food. And we love the direct-to-consumer kind of services. And of course, last but not least, consumers are interested and consuming at about roughly 10%, at least in the we know in the US, alternative proteins, whether it's plant-based, whether it's cultured meats in the lab or insects, there's quite a bit of interest in alternative proteins. And we actually desperately need these alternatives because of the demand that is coming from Asia, middle class. Okay, so I want to give a good news and the bad news. The bad news first is that AgFood system is among the least digitized industries. The good news is that there is plenty of opportunities for entrepreneurs to step in and bring about disruptive technologies that would change the system. We need digital and genomics disruptions along the entire value chain of agriculture and food, from farm to table sort of thing. Plenty of opportunities. So, and there are, some may say, oh, well, there, you know, the low-hanging fruit has been taken already. I promise you, as an investor, as somebody who lives this day in and day out, I can tell you that there are plenty of low-hanging fruits is still out there. And I know some 40,000 people are registering for the next couple of days. Of those 40,000 people, I have a sense that half of them are entrepreneurs. So please, those of you who are entrepreneurs in the audience, get busy, look into agriculture and get involved. We need you. And as Steve Jobs famously said, as part of the Apple's motto is think differently. Entrepreneurs have no trouble thinking differently. So I'm looking forward to seeing all kinds of new things coming out of India and the rest of the world. Okay, but before you become an entrepreneur in food and ag, I would have one big request from you. I want you to think about, what do farmers really need? Farming is hard work. It's really hard work. It's harsh, actually. You go out in the climate and you're exposed to elements which you cannot control. But on top of that, agriculture and food system have relatively low margins. So the revenue that you generate, the profit margin is not huge. So think about what it is they need to improve their margins and make the job a little bit less difficult. Okay, and so here's some of the areas that I think you can start right away with plenty of opportunities. Logistics and supply chains, I mentioned, robotics and automation, farm inputs, how do we reduce chemicals, water use, etc. We need new business model to improve the farm revenue and food system revenues. And much of this could come by cutting the middlemen and do direct to consumer and e-commerce, and plenty of other things you can do, alternative proteins, whatever. But these are just some ideas. Okay, so let me switch gears and give you some examples of how some of the companies are doing great things that would address issues related to sustainability. For example, we have now robots that go in the field, and instead of spraying chemicals to kill weeds, they use a laser beam to kill them. We have tremendous number of successful indoor agriculture companies which use a lot less water and chemicals to produce fresh, locally produced greens. So they address a number of issues that we are concerned about. They're consumer facing, obviously. So not only they are addressing sustainability issues, but also consumer demands. Other companies that are helping with input, Pivot Bio is an example. What they do, they are utilizing microbes, naturally occurring soil microbes that would colonize corn roots and help them fix nitrogen from the air, so reduces the fertilizer use. Another company is Provivi. They use insect pheromones to confuse the insects with the mating process. So you can take pity on these insects that are being confused for mating, but that's what we need to do for sustainability. A company called Grow Guru is using smart irrigation system, all digitized, and it's placed, the sensors are placed deep in the soil, so you don't have to rip them up every year that you're planting new. And it's because it's deep in the soil, it's really applied to tree farms as well. Okay, so let's move on. Greenlight. Oh, I wanted to mention also Greenlight. They use RNA technology to create natural insecticide resistance. All right, so alternative proteins, we see a lot of great companies like Impossible Food. I use it. It's a soybean-based burger. I use it a couple times a week, maybe. It's delicious, it's good. There is the Memphis meat, which is a cultured meat produced in the lab from the stem cells. And we now have lab-produced or plant-based fish and seafood. And of course, the trend is towards creating really tasty food and snacks especially that use proteins from insects. Okay, and then automation and robotics to make farm life a little bit easier. There is the robot company Root AI that's used indoors to pick small fruits like vegetables like tomatoes. And then we have big ones that go out in the field and help harvest things like grapes or vegetables and the strawberries that are pretty close to the ground. All right, I would be remiss not to again go back to the issue of small and medium-sized businesses. We need to take the ag tech and food tech to the farm and to the rural areas. Many of these people in seeking and trying to feed their families, they move to big cities, and this is not a healthy trend for any nation. We need to strengthen the rural system, bring prosperity to these villages. And that helps close some of the social gaps that we have. And it also addresses the overall well-being of all citizens, not just the city folks. And let me say that of all the companies that I mentioned, I wanted to highlight one company that I hope would be a model for the entrepreneurs online and in the room in Hyderabad to look at TiE, which is a farmers network. It connects farmers to input providers, to output providers, transportation, and financial institutions. And the part that I'm very pleased about is that it works with micro enterprises to help them with small needs they have. So to me, that is a great example of not only doing disruption in farming and food system, but you are addressing social gaps and addressing bringing technology to rural areas. And I want to wrap up my talk with one big plea to all of us to think about. Food security is national security. Every nation knows that without a strong food and agriculture system, our national security is on shaky grounds. It's implicit, by instinct, we know it. But I want this to be explicit. Some countries are developing national strategic plans for this sole purpose. Every nation needs to do that. We need to be self-sufficient. We need to have systems that are resilient and would not be disrupted the way COVID created some problems for us. And that could be managed by having distributed, decentralized systems as well as the centralized systems that we have. And I think I want to say also when the food system is being hacked, how could you not consider this as a national security? I remember a few months ago, our meat packing factories were hacked. Our energy companies were hacked. So we cannot tolerate these things because our livelihood so depends on our healthy ag and food system. And with that, I want to thank the TiE again for inviting me. And I want to tell you also that my favorite bird is your national bird, the peacock. So thank you very much again, and good morning from US and good evening to Hyderabad.